why the longer we wait to address this, the more that it's going to be more difficult to fight it. And then we can get into this thing called religious war and spiritual war. So it's this, like I said, we can talk for weeks on this subject.
Well, tell us a little bit about that.
Religious warfare. Communism is a religion. Most people don't understand that. They don't know it. Communism is a religion. Over 97% of the people in China have, quote, no religion. Well, yeah, they kind of do. It's the Chinese Communist Party. Communism is a religion. And to be a religion, and a communist being a religion, you must null and void all other religions. So Xi Jinping has gone through China banning Christian crosses, Star of David, mosques, synagogues, churches. If they can be turned into something else, they are. So there cannot be any other God that is competing with the Chinese Communist Party. That ought to shake everybody to their boots. Just that fact alone means that we are so divided, so oil and water with a country, with a people, and by the way, I got a segue here. There is only one China. Our beef is not with the Chinese people. A lot of those people want to be free, and they want to be out from under the umbrella of totalitarian oppression. So our beef is not with the Chinese people. Our beef was with the Chinese Communist Party. However, the belief that there's only one God and it's the Chinese Communist Party, that's what we're talking about. And that shows that how divided we are, and how we just cannot and will. I mean, our country, the U.S., was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. And just by that one fact alone, and there's about 1,000 of them, that should say, okay, I'm not buying any more Chinese products for the rest of my life, and I'm going to train my kids not to do that. So that's religious warfare. Underneath religious warfare, there's spiritual warfare. Dark versus light, good versus evil, God versus Satan. Well, if your religion says that only the Chinese Communist Party and the leader, Xi Jinping, is your God, then he's in competition with all the other gods that are out there, and potentially the God that most of us are familiar with if you're Christian or Jewish. So this really is, when you really boil it down and you really start adding everything up and connecting all the dots, this is a religious war, and it's a spiritual war. It's good versus evil, and it's God versus Satan. And yes, I'm drawing the conclusion that the CCP is partnered with Satan on this thing, because if you're looking at an either or, good versus evil, dark versus light, that's kind of what we're looking at. That's exactly what we're looking at. But each individual needs to come up to that conclusion on their own. They need to get their own information. The thing here is when you go to social media and you go to legacy media, it's destroying your critical thinking capability. So over time, you're just fed the propaganda, and it's like, okay, this is what I should be thinking, because you're no longer having those skills of critical thinking. So all these things combined say that that every citizen needs to take this as a wake-up call and to start their own journey to understand really what's going on in their world. I hate to say it, we've all been lulled into busy entertainment, materialism, all these kind of things, and we've got to get back to basics.
Communism is rooted in envy, and the devil fell because of envy. So they're definitely...
Well, yeah, and communism is rooted in fear, and the devil and Satan are based on fear. That, with God and, and by the way, in the book, we have top religious leaders that communicate on this. It's not just my word. It's top black pastors, top white pastors, and they'll explain it in much better detail than I do. But yes, it's either or. When you draw the list and you run the chart, the T chart, the devil's based on fear. Communist Party's based on fear. And the other side, the good side, the light side, is based on faith. So that's the difference. And the way you chase out fear is you have faith. So anyway, like I said, it's we're getting to the edge of my my authority on that subject, and that's why I defer to my pastor colleagues to explain it even further.
Well, so we are at war with the Chinese Communist Party. What does the Chinese Communist Party consider victory in this war, and how would that affect the lives of everyday Americans? Are we talking actual Chinese government here in the U.S. or something else?
Actual Chinese government in the U.S. And if you don't succumb, you don't submit, you will be re-educated. What that means, you will be tortured. You will be punished until you get your mind right. And if you don't, and if you look like you're not going to get it right, they'll just execute you. I mean, if you want to know how you're going to be treated, look how the Chinese Communist Party has treated the Tibetans, the Uyghurs, their own people, the Uyghurs, and who are Chinese Muslims. And then also look at how they've treated Falun Gong practitioners, because they won't commit to the CCP. So they're, of course, the enemy. If you don't commit to the CCP and you're Chinese, that's the worst of the worst. So they're the enemy of the CCP, Falun Gong in China and Falun Gong in the U.S. And by the way, they're being persecuted by, 40 Chinese police stations on U.S. soil, U.S. sovereign soil. So that's their espionage offices, their training offices, and their persecution centers. 40 of them in the United States. Can you imagine the FBI having, or the CIA having 40 police stations in China, and being allowed to have those police stations in China? By the way, they're in Canada, and they're in Australia and Mexico and so on. That's how deep this subject is, and quite honestly, it's fascinating. On one side of it, it's a spy thriller, but you're on the front lines and you're the main character. But it's honestly, it's a devious spy thriller, and it'll have your butt in a movie seat for a long time. The problem is, it's a true story.
I mean, why should we care what the CCP is doing to, Uyghurs or Tibetans or Falun Gong, even on U.S. soil? Like, what does that have to do with most Americans?
Because that's how you will be treated. And like I said, the world will be won or lost within the next 10 years. That's how you and your family will be treated. You will be slaves to the Chinese communist machine. And if you don't like it, you'll have some time to get your head right, and that's it. And by the way, they work on a 996 schedule over there. Okay, so suicide's rampant. They have suicide nets in their factories because they work people 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 hours a day, and only a 10-minute break for food. And if you got a problem with that, then you're locked up in the back of the warehouse or in the back of the factory or wherever it's at. So how they treat their people. Here's another one. We haven't even talked about this. Live human organ transplant industry. Okay. So live human organ transplants, another word for that is murder. They've done in the numbers that we have is over 3 million of those murders just for their transplants. And there's a black market. So there's a book coming out in February with a colleague, and it's called Organs to Order. So in other words, just like fast food, organs to order. And incidentally, they also have, this is what's cool. So when you want to buy that new product from China that you can't wait to get your hands on, whatever it is, they have infant farms, infants. So what they do is they get someone pregnant, CCP members get their, they use their DNA to get somebody pregnant, and now that child, that either infant or that child, grows up for spare parts for that Chinese CCP member or leader to have spare parts that are complete donor match. That's who you're dealing with. Now, you want to fund that? You want to buy products and fund that? Then that's your conscience. It's not mine.
I want to mention that while that sounds very far-fetched, and I haven't actually seen any evidence of that, but what I remember when this idea of like forced organ harvesting came out, and this was like the mid-late 2000s,
yeah.
right? And everyone was like, conspiracy theory, conspiracy theory, conspiracy theory. And it ultimately just turned out to be good investigative journalism. And I mean, now the proof of that is everywhere, right? The regular, run-of-the-mill organ harvesting, killing Falun Gong and Uyghurs for their organs. So this child thing is again, while to me this is new information, I'm like, yeah, this actually really merits some more investigation, because that's like just an extra level of creepy.
Well, it's an extra level of truth that, like I said, we've been doing this for 15 years. We've got a network about over 500 people. And to me, it's just another Friday. Okay. I'm sure your audience, they're like, this guy's got a tinfoil hat. He needs to be ushered out the door.
Not our audience.
And by the way, I had a pretty strong resume 15 years ago when I started this thing. And when I started, after getting the information and I spoke to CEOs, boards of directors, and so on. And it was, you could see that some of the audience would think that I was tinfoil hat guy. And so I basically had to throw my resume in the fireplace and continue along this battle. And so somebody says, well, why do you do this, Casey? And I said, well, if it's not me, then who? And, it's not for fame. It's none of that stuff. It's duty. 100% it's duty. And all these things that I'm saying right now to your answer, Matt, earlier, it's like, hey, can you give us a 30-second preview and just give us a summary, Casey? It's like, you can't do it. You're in a war you don't know you're in, and it's really, really bad. And you've got an enemy that's the most formidable, destructive, capable enemy in history who wants you dead. Okay, that's it. I think that I did that in less than 30 seconds.
There's a lot more of this hour-long podcast to watch. Just click below to see it at ChinaUncensored.tv. When you join us there, you can be part of my exclusive China Uncensored 50 Cent Army, where we stand up to the CCP together. And also, check out Casey Fleming's book, The Red Tsunami, available for pre-order now. The link is below.